I need to be honest with you about something before I even get into the details of this story, because I think it genuinely matters for understanding why this particular trade hit me differently than almost anything else I've covered this entire offseason. When Mark Stein posted his initial breaking news thread, I actually had to read it 3 separate times before I fully processed what I was looking at, because the specific emotional weight of this trade, considering everything that's happened over the past several years, genuinely caught me off guard in a way that pure basketball analysis usually doesn't. The topic: Jimmy Butler has been traded from the Golden State Warriors to the Dallas Mavericks in exchange for Klay Thompson and Kyrie Irving as part of a complex, multi-piece framework, and I want you to really sit with the specific image of Klay Thompson potentially returning to the exact organization where he built his entire Hall of Fame legacy, because that emotional narrative alone makes this one of the most significant stories of this entire NBA offseason. Let me give you the necessary background here, because Klay's specific journey since leaving Golden State genuinely matters for understanding why this particular reunion carries so much weight. After spending his entire prime with the Warriors, becoming one of the greatest shooters in the history of this sport, and winning multiple championships as part of that historic dynasty, Klay eventually left for Dallas as part of a complicated sign-and-trade arrangement that many analysts, myself included, viewed at the time as a genuinely sad but understandable conclusion to his tenure with the only organization he'd ever known as a professional. Now, barely more than a year later, circumstances have shifted enough that he's reportedly on his way back to the exact place where his entire basketball identity was forged, and that specific narrative arc genuinely transcends typical trade analysis. Here's exactly how Stein delivered this report, and I want to walk through his specific language because the mechanics here reveal genuine complexity that deserves careful explanation. He specifically stated that his sources within both organizations confirmed the framework centers around Golden State sending Butler's expiring contract to Dallas, who has been actively looking to shed multi-year financial commitments as they continue building their entire long-term timeline around their younger core pieces. In exchange, the Warriors would receive both Thompson and Irving, giving them an immediate influx of proven shooting and shot creation that directly complements Curry's continued excellence as he enters the later stages of his own remarkable career. The reaction from inside the Warriors organization was, understandably, unlike anything I've seen for any other trade story this entire offseason. Multiple current Warriors players posted specifically about Thompson's return, with one veteran teammate who overlapped with Klay during his previous Golden State tenure sharing a message specifically referencing how much the current locker room culture still carries echoes of exactly the kind of professional standard and championship pedigree that Thompson helped establish during those historic dynasty years. That's not a generic welcome message. That's a teammate who genuinely understands the institutional and cultural significance of this specific homecoming beyond just the tactical basketball implications. Now here's the whiplash moment, because just months ago, most credible analysts had essentially concluded that Thompson's departure from Golden State represented a permanent clean break, the kind of ending that professional sports rarely reverses once a beloved veteran moves on to a genuinely new chapter elsewhere. Watching circumstances align this specifically, with Dallas's roster construction needs shifting dramatically, and Golden State suddenly possessing exactly the kind of expiring contract that facilitates this specific kind of transaction, genuinely demonstrates how unpredictable professional sports timelines can be. Sometimes the story you thought was permanently concluded gets a genuinely unexpected additional chapter, and that's exactly what's happening here. Stein gave 3 specific reasons for his confidence in this particular report, and each one adds meaningful context to understanding the full complexity of this transaction. First, he specifically cited direct conversations with Mavericks front office personnel who confirmed their organization has been genuinely motivated to move off both Thompson's and Irving's remaining multi-year salary commitments as they accelerate their rebuild around their younger foundational pieces, meaning Golden State's willingness to absorb that specific salary structure created genuine mutual motivation for both sides. Second, he pointed to the specific timing of Butler's continued recovery uncertainty, noting that Golden State's front office had grown increasingly convinced that his expiring contract represented more valuable trade currency right now than continuing to wait on his health for an entire season. Third, and this is genuinely the detail that struck me most, he mentioned that Thompson himself had reportedly expressed direct, specific interest in exploring exactly this kind of return once his representation became aware that Golden State might genuinely be open to reacquiring him, indicating this wasn't purely a front office initiative, but rather something Klay himself had actively pursued behind the scenes. Predictably, Stephen A. Smith brought his own genuine skepticism to this story once it hit the broader national conversation, and his specific critique here deserves real engagement given the complexity involved. He specifically questioned whether both Thompson and Irving, at their current respective career stages, genuinely provide enough two-way value to justify moving on from Butler's individual talent, even accounting for his significant injury, arguing that adding two aging veterans with their own respective health and consistency questions doesn't necessarily represent a clear talent upgrade over what Golden State previously had in place. The reasonable counter to that critique is that both Thompson and Irving provide exactly the kind of proven shooting and shot creation that immediately, tangibly complements Curry's continued excellence without requiring the kind of extended integration period that a completely unfamiliar acquisition would necessitate. Thompson specifically already understands this exact offensive system intimately from his previous tenure, meaning his adjustment period should theoretically be dramatically shorter than any other potential alternative addition. Let's talk about the human side of this trade, because Thompson's specific homecoming carries genuinely unique emotional resonance that goes well beyond typical roster analysis. Returning to the exact organization where he became a legend, where his specific number will presumably be honored eventually, and where an entire generation of Warriors fans still associate him directly with some of the most memorable moments in franchise history, represents exactly the kind of full-circle narrative that transcends pure basketball logic. There's real, genuine sentiment driving portions of this specific trade, and I don't think that sentiment should be dismissed just because pure analytical models might evaluate the basketball logic differently. Now let's address the honest risk here, because both Thompson and Irving carry genuine, well-documented injury histories and consistency questions that shouldn't simply be overlooked because of the exciting narrative surrounding this specific reunion. Thompson has dealt with significant injuries throughout recent seasons that have affected his explosiveness and defensive mobility, while Irving's own injury history and periodic availability concerns throughout his career represent genuine risk factors that Golden State's front office is knowingly accepting as part of this specific transaction. Let's also spend real time discussing what this move means for Dallas's broader organizational timeline going forward. Moving off both Thompson and Irving completes their transition toward building exclusively around their younger core, giving them significant additional financial flexibility precisely when their front office has clearly signaled their intention to reconstruct around a completely different timeline than what those two veterans originally represented when they joined the organization. Let's also address the calendar pressure specific to this trade, because with the regular season rapidly approaching, resolving Golden State's uncertain front court and back court depth through proven veterans who already understand championship-level basketball represents exactly the kind of decisive roster management that prevents wasted early season development time on unfamiliar personnel combinations. Let's also talk about the specific tactical fit questions this trade raises, because integrating two ball-dominant veterans like Irving and the returning Thompson alongside Curry requires genuine thought about shot distribution and offensive hierarchy. Steve Kerr will need to navigate exactly how touches and offensive responsibility get allocated among three players who have each, at various points in their respective careers, functioned as legitimate primary offensive options, and how quickly that specific chemistry develops will genuinely determine whether this reunion produces the championship caliber results everyone is currently hoping for. Let's also consider the broader emotional impact on the entire Golden State fan base, because Thompson's specific return generates a kind of collective excitement that pure statistical analysis simply cannot capture. Longtime Warriors fans who watched him build his entire legacy during those historic championship years now get to witness a genuinely unexpected additional chapter to that story, and that emotional resonance alone has already generated enormous excitement across the entire fan base regardless of how the actual on-court results eventually play out. So let me bring this one home. The three core reasons Stein gave for his confidence in this reporting were: first, Dallas's genuine motivation to shed multi-year salary commitments as they rebuild around younger pieces. Second, Golden State's growing conviction that Butler's expiring contract represented more valuable trade currency than continuing to wait on his uncertain recovery. And third, confirmation that Thompson himself had actively pursued exploring this specific return. And the receipt validating all of this sits right there in that specific, emotionally resonant reaction from a current Warriors veteran who clearly understood exactly what cultural and competitive significance this reunion carries. Here's what I'm watching next as this story continues developing. How quickly Thompson, Irving, and Curry can establish genuine offensive chemistry together, and how both newcomers' respective health holds up throughout an entire grueling season are both going to become the defining storylines that determine whether this genuinely emotional reunion translates into meaningful competitive success. Do you think Klay Thompson's return to Golden State alongside Kyrie Irving gives the Warriors a legitimate championship-caliber core around Stephen Curry? Or do you think the combined injury history and defensive concerns of both newcomers make this move too risky despite the exciting narrative surrounding it? Drop your honest take in the comments below. Hit that like button if this breakdown helped you process this genuinely emotional homecoming story, and make sure you're subscribed because there's plenty more Warriors coverage coming your way as this season approaches. Take care, everybody. See you in the next video.